The morning sun cast long shadows across the Galactic Council's crystal chambers as representatives from 47 different species gathered for another routine session. Ambassador David Chun adjusted his simple gray uniform and checked his notes one final time. 300 years had passed since humanity first knocked on the galaxy's door, and still the other species treated them like curious pets rather than equals. The Draxi delegation hissed quietly among themselves, their scaled faces showing barely concealed contempt as they glanced toward the human section. Their warrior culture had dominated 17 star systems through pure military might, and they saw humans as weaklings who had somehow stumbled into space travel. The towering reptilian beings wore elaborate armor even in the peaceful council chambers, their weapons gleaming despite treaty regulations. Across the hall, the insectoid hive collective buzzed in their strange harmonic language. Their compound eyes reflected the chamber's lights as they discussed trade routes that deliberately excluded human space. To them, humanity represented an evolutionary failure, a species that had reached the stars without developing proper hive intelligence or collective consciousness. They had written extensive reports about how humans would eventually go extinct due to their individualistic nature. The ethereal Zephyrians floated in their environmental suits, their gaseous forms shimmering with disapproval. These ancient beings had witnessed the rise and fall of dozens of civilizations, and they had classified humanity as another short-lived curiosity. Their mathematical models predicted human civilization would collapse within 500 years. Due to internal conflicts and resource depletion, David had heard all the whispers and read all the reports. The galaxy had assigned humanity a small collection of worlds near the outer rim, far from major trade routes and strategic resources. It was the galactic equivalent of giving a child a corner table at an adult dinner party. The other species traded among themselves, formed military alliances, and made decisions that affected billions of lives without bothering to consult the humans. What none of them realized was that humanity had been listening to every conversation, monitoring every communication, and studying every military doctrine for 3 centuries. While the Draxi perfected their shock tactics, humans analyzed their supply chains. While the Hive Collective coordinated their swarm formations, humans mapped their command structures. While the Zephyrians calculated probability matrices, humans prepared for scenarios their ancient minds couldn't imagine. Earth's colonial expansion had been methodical and purposeful, though it appeared random. To outside observers, every human settlement was positioned to monitor key hyperspace routes. Every research station collected intelligence on nearby alien activities. Every diplomatic mission gathered detailed information about alien psychology, military capabilities, and economic weaknesses. The galaxy saw peaceful explorers and curious scientists, where they should have seen the most sophisticated intelligence network ever constructed. The deception ran deeper than mere observation. Human colonies that appeared to be simple farming communities were actually fortress worlds with underground manufacturing facilities. Merchant vessels that seemed to carry nothing but agricultural products had hidden compartments filled with weapons that violated every galactic treaty on destructive capability. Research stations that claimed to study stellar phenomena were actually monitoring posts equipped with sensors that could track fleet movements across dozens of star systems. David smiled politely as Chancellor Vorthak of the Centauri Dominion dismissed human concerns about piracy in the outer systems. The 4-armed alien gestured dismissively with all his appendages, explaining that humans needed to accept their position as a minor species and stop bothering the council with trivial matters. The other delegates nodded in agreement, their various forms of laughter creating a cacophony of alien sounds. If only they knew about the 3,000 human vessels currently tracking the pirate fleets, waiting for the perfect moment to eliminate every single raider in a coordinated strike. If only they understood that humanity had identified the pirate bases, infiltrated their communication networks, and prepared contingency plans for 17 different scenarios. The pirates would disappear one day, and the galaxy would assume they had simply moved to easier hunting grounds. The session continued with discussions of trade regulations that excluded human space, military exercises that ignored human territory, and diplomatic initiatives that treated humanity as an afterthought. David took careful notes, not because he needed the information for his government, but because every word revealed more about alien psychology and decision-making processes. Back on Earth, Director Sarah Martinez reviewed the daily intelligence reports in a facility that officially didn't exist. The room was filled with holographic displays showing the position of every known alien vessel, the status of every colonial defense system, and the readiness level of assets that the galaxy didn't know humanity possessed. 3 centuries of careful preparation had created a military infrastructure that spanned known space. Hidden in plain sight, the reports painted a picture of a galaxy teetering on the edge of chaos. The Corvan Empire was mobilizing forces for another expansion campaign. The Hive Collective was showing signs of internal strife that could lead to civil war. The Zephyrians were withdrawing from several treaty obligations, suggesting they expected major conflicts in the near future. All the signs pointed to galactic war within the next 50 years. Humanity had spent 3 centuries learning how to fight every species in the galaxy while appearing completely harmless. They had developed weapons designed specifically to counter alien defenses, tactics tailored to exploit alien psychology, and strategies that would allow a smaller force to defeat much larger enemies. Every human child learned military history alongside mathematics, not because they glorified war, but because they understood that peace could only be maintained through strength. The galaxy's greatest mistake was assuming that humanity's peaceful nature came from weakness rather than wisdom. They saw a species that preferred negotiation to conquest, cooperation to domination. They interpreted humanity's restraint as inability, their patience as cowardice. They failed to recognize that the most dangerous warriors were those who understood the true cost of war and fought only when all other options had been exhausted. As the council session ended, and delegates filed out to their respective vessels, David gathered his notes and prepared for another routine report to Earth. The galaxy continued to ignore humanity, treating them as irrelevant players in cosmic politics. Soon, very soon, they would learn the difference between a species that couldn't fight and a species that chose not to fight. The distinction would prove fatal for whoever forced humanity to demonstrate it. Emperor Khazor stood before the massive holographic display in his war room, studying the galactic map with predatory satisfaction. The Corvan Empire had grown steadily for 2 centuries, absorbing weaker civilizations and expanding their territory through calculated aggression. Now, his attention had turned to the forgotten corner of space where the humans maintained their quiet existence. The Emperor's scaled hide gleamed under the chamber's harsh lights as he pointed at the cluster of human worlds with one clawed finger. Intelligence reports showed minimal military presence, outdated defensive systems, and populations focused on agriculture and scientific research. These were not warriors but farmers and academics, easy prey for the Corvan war machine that had crushed 43 different species. Admiral Vex bowed low before approaching the display, his own armor bearing the scars of countless battles. The Corvan military doctrine was simple and effective: overwhelming force applied without mercy until complete surrender was achieved. They had refined this approach over centuries, turning conquest into an art form that other species feared and respected. The planned assault on New Terra would serve as both a resource grab and a demonstration of Corvan power. The human colony was rumored to contain rare mineral deposits, but more importantly, it represented an easy victory that would remind the galaxy why the Corvan Empire remained unchallenged. Emperor Khazor had grown frustrated with the slow pace of recent campaigns and wanted to show his enemies that his forces could still strike with devastating efficiency. The attack began exactly as planned. Corvan battle fleets emerged from hyperspace around New Terra, expecting to find panicked colonists and hastily assembled militia forces. Admiral Vex commanded the operation from his flagship, confident that the human settlement would fall within hours. His sensors showed no orbital defenses, no military installations, and no signs of organized resistance. What the Corvins found instead was an empty planet. New Terra's cities stood silent and apparently abandoned, their lights still burning. But no life signs detected anywhere on the surface. The expected flood of desperate communications never came. The human colony had simply vanished, leaving behind infrastructure and equipment but no people to defend them. Admiral Vex ordered his forces to proceed with caution, suspecting some kind of trap. His experience had taught him that empty planets often held surprises, though he couldn't imagine what a species like humanity could have prepared. The Corvan fleet moved into standard bombardment formation, preparing to reduce the colonial infrastructure to ruins before landing ground forces. To secure the mineral deposits, the orbital bombardment began with textbook precision. Corvan plasma cannons reduced entire city blocks to molten slag, while particle beams carved through industrial complexes like hot knives through butter. The Admiral watched with professional satisfaction as humanity's greatest colony burned beneath the fury of his weapons. Victory was proceeding exactly according to schedule. Then the planet struck back. Hidden launch tubes opened across New Terra's surface, revealing themselves for the first time in 3 centuries of careful concealment. The weapons that emerged violated 17 different galactic treaties on destructive capability, designed specifically to counter Corvan shields and armor. Magnetic acceleration cannons fired projectiles at near-light speed while directed energy beams cut through the strongest battle armor like paper. The human colonists hadn't fled at all. They had taken shelter in underground bunkers designed to withstand planetary bombardment, while automated defense systems carried out a battle plan that had been rehearsed thousands of times. Every system on New Terra had been built with this moment in mind, waiting patiently for someone to mistake human restraint for weakness. Admiral Vex watched in horror as his mighty fleet was torn apart by weapons that shouldn't exist. Ships that had survived battles against the galaxy's greatest military powers were reduced to debris in minutes. The humans had studied Corvan tactics for centuries, identified every weakness in their armor and formations, then built weapons specifically designed to exploit those vulnerabilities. The Third Fleet's destruction was total and absolute. Not a single Corvan vessel escaped to report what had actually happened. The Admiral's final transmission to his Emperor carried a desperate warning about humanity's true nature, but the message was cut short when human projectiles reduced his flagship to expanding gas and metal fragments. Back on the Corvan homeworld, Emperor Khazor received only silence where he expected reports of victory. Long-range sensors detected the debris field where his fleet should have been celebrating conquest. The implications were staggering, impossible to accept. The Third Fleet had been one of his most powerful formations, capable of reducing entire civilizations to ash. How could it have been destroyed by a species that barely registered on galactic power rankings? The Emperor's rage was magnificent and terrible, shaking the foundations of his palace as he roared demands for explanation. His military advisors had no answers that made sense. The humans had no known weapons capable of such destruction, no military traditions that suggested advanced warfare capabilities, no alliances that could have provided outside assistance. Yet somehow they had obliterated a Corvan battle fleet that had terrorized the galaxy for decades. Intelligence reports began flooding in from across human space, painting a picture that defied everything the galaxy thought it knew about humanity. Human merchant vessels were shedding false hulls to reveal military configurations. Research stations were powering up defense systems that had been hidden for centuries. Colonial militias were demonstrating weapons technology that made the Corvan military look primitive by comparison. Emperor Khazor realized with growing dread that his empire had just attacked not a collection of peaceful farmers, but a sleeping military power that had been preparing for this exact moment for 300 years. The humans had allowed themselves to be dismissed and ignored while building the most sophisticated war machine in galactic history. Now that machine was waking up, and the Corvan Empire stood directly in its path. The Emperor's War Council gathered an emergency session as reports continued to arrive. Human forces were mobilizing across their territory, revealing assets that intelligence had never suspected existed. The galaxy's most peaceful species was transforming before their eyes into something that made the Corvan military doctrine look crude and outdated. Admiral Yorth, the Emperor's most trusted commander, studied the tactical displays with growing alarm. The humans weren't just defending themselves. They were moving with purpose and coordination that suggested detailed battle plans prepared years in advance. Every human action served multiple strategic objectives. Every movement revealed new capabilities that had been hidden beneath centuries of careful deception. The Corvan Empire had made the fatal mistake of confusing humanity's choice for peace with inability to wage war. They had forced the galaxy's greatest military power to abandon restraint and demonstrate why they had chosen to remain quiet for so long. The sleeping giant was awakening, and its fury would reshape the balance of power across known space. Director Lisa Park walked through the corridors of Terra Command, a facility so deeply buried beneath Earth's surface that its existence was known only to a handful of people in each generation. The walls hummed with activity as humanity's greatest secret finally came to life after 3 centuries of careful preparation. Officers who had trained for battles they hoped would never come now coordinated the largest military operation in galactic history. The holographic displays showed the true scope of human military capability spread across known space. What alien intelligence had cataloged as merchant fleets were actually mobile weapons platforms carrying enough firepower to level entire worlds. Research stations that supposedly studied stellar phenomena were command centers coordinating the movements of hidden battle groups. Colonial settlements that appeared to be simple farming communities were fortress worlds with manufacturing capabilities that dwarfed the Corvan Empire's entire industrial base. News of new Terra's successful defense had spread through human space, faster than light itself, carried by quantum communication networks that the galaxy didn't know existed. On every human world, in every orbital station, in every seemingly innocent civilian facility, people were receiving activation codes that had been waiting for this moment since the first human stepped into space. Commander Robert Hayes stood in the control room of what appeared to be a simple asteroid mining station in the Beta sector. The facility's outer shell showed all the signs of industrial mining equipment, but beneath that carefully maintained facade lay one of humanity's most sophisticated military installations. Banks of sensors that had been monitoring Corvan fleet movements for decades now switched to active targeting modes while weapon systems powered up for the first time since their installation. The Corvan Empire had spent centuries building their reputation through brute force and overwhelming numbers. Their strategy was simple and effective, deploying massive fleets to crush any opposition through sheer firepower. What they had never encountered was an enemy that understood their tactics better than they did themselves, an enemy that had studied every battle, analyzed every formation, and prepared counters for every possible scenario. Human intelligence networks activated across Corvan space, revealing the true extent of humanity's preparation. Trade delegations that had visited Corvan worlds for decades were actually reconnaissance teams that had mapped every military installation, cataloged every defense system, and identified every strategic weakness. Cultural exchange programs had placed human observers in positions where they could monitor communications, study decision-making processes, and understand the psychological profiles of key military leaders. The first human counterstrike came without warning and from directions the Corvans had never considered vulnerable. Supply convoys that had traveled the same routes for decades simply vanished between star systems, their cargoes seized by human forces that appeared from empty space and disappeared just as quickly. Communication networks that had operated flawlessly for centuries went dark as hidden sabotage programs activated simultaneously across dozens of worlds. Admiral Yorth received reports of impossible defeats from across the Empire's frontier. Corvan battle groups that should have been undefeatable were being systematically destroyed by forces that seemed to know their every move before they made it. Human weapons appeared to violate the laws of physics, striking from ranges that should have been impossible and penetrating defenses that had never been breached. The humans fought with a cold precision that terrified even veteran Corvan warriors. They took no unnecessary risks, wasted no ammunition, and left no survivors who couldn't provide useful intelligence. Every human action served multiple strategic purposes. Every attack weakened Corvan capabilities while strengthening human positions. It was warfare elevated to the level of scientific art, conducted by minds that had studied conflict theory while the Corvans were still celebrating their latest conquest. Dr. Amanda Foster monitored the operation from her laboratory complex hidden beneath the peaceful surface of humanity's agricultural world. Haven, her team had spent decades developing weapons specifically designed to counter every known alien defense system. Corvan energy shields that had protected their ships for centuries were useless against human particle beams that operated on frequencies the aliens had never encountered. Armor that had withstood the fury of entire enemy fleets melted like ice under the focused heat of human plasma weapons. Emperor Kazer's war council struggled to comprehend reports that defied everything they thought they knew about military science. Human forces seemed to appear from nowhere, strike with devastating effectiveness, and vanish before Corvan reinforcements could respond. Their weapons technology was generations ahead of anything in the galactic database. Their tactics incorporated principles that Corvan military academies had never studied. The Emperor himself could hardly believe the intelligence reports flooding his command center. The peaceful farmers and curious scientists that the galaxy had dismissed for 3 centuries were systematically dismantling the Corvan war machine with surgical precision. Every battle revealed new human capabilities that had been hidden beneath layers of careful deception and strategic patience. Captain Derek Mills commanded one of humanity's deep strike vessels, a ship that had masqueraded as a civilian transport for 50 years while actually serving as a forward reconnaissance platform. His mission was to eliminate Corvan forward operating bases in the Sigma region, facilities that had taken the Empire decades to establish and fortify. The attack would demonstrate humanity's ability to project power across vast distances while gathering intelligence on Corvan defensive capabilities. The assault began with electronic warfare that blinded Corvan sensors and communications, followed by precision strikes that eliminated key defensive positions with minimal collateral damage. Human forces moved through the base complex like ghosts, their equipment designed to exploit every weakness in Corvan architecture and defensive doctrine. Within hours, installations that had been considered impregnable were reduced to ruins. While their defenders struggled to understand what had happened, word of these defeats spread through Corvan, space faster than official communications could suppress them. Military units that had never known fear began to experience something they had no words for: the absolute terror of facing an enemy that seemed to know their every weakness and had prepared perfect counters for their every strength. The psychological impact was as devastating as the physical destruction, undermining the confidence that had made Corvan military doctrine effective. Director Park reviewed the tactical summaries with satisfaction but no joy. Humanity had never wanted this war. But once forced to fight, they would wage it with the same methodical precision they brought to every endeavor. The Corvan Empire had awakened something that had been sleeping for 3 centuries, and now they would face the consequences of mistaking restraint for weakness. The galaxy was about to learn why humanity had chosen to remain quiet for so long, and why that choice had been an act of mercy rather than fear. The sleeping giant was fully awake now, and its wrath would reshape the balance of power across known space. The emergency session of the Galactic Council convened in chambers that had witnessed 3 centuries of peaceful debate, but now trembled with tension that threatened to shatter diplomatic protocols. Representatives from 47 species gathered in groups that whispered fearful rumors about the impossible war taking place in Corvan space. The humans who had been dismissed as galactic irrelevance were systematically destroying one of the most powerful military forces the galaxy had ever known. Ambassador Michael Torres sat quietly in the human delegation section, his calm demeanor unchanged despite the chaos erupting around him. The same patient silence that had characterized human participation in galactic politics for centuries now seemed ominous rather than peaceful. Other delegates studied his face for signs of aggression or triumph, but found only the same measured composure they had always ignored. Chancellor Vex of the Draxi Republic rose from his seat with scales bristling in agitation. His warrior culture, struggling to comprehend reports that violated everything they understood about military capability. The Draxi had fought the Kovans to a standstill in 3 separate wars, earning grudging respect for their tactical sophistication and individual combat prowess. Yet these same Corvans were being obliterated by humans who had never participated in galactic military exercises or demonstrated any combat capabilities whatsoever. The insectoid representatives of the hive collective buzzed with harmonic frequencies that conveyed deep unease to anyone capable of understanding their complex language. Their species had evolved perfect coordination and tactical awareness through millions of years of collective consciousness. Yet they were receiving reports of human military coordination that surpassed even their most sophisticated hive strategies. Individual humans were operating as if connected by invisible threads of communication that allowed perfect synchronization across vast distances. Prime Minister Jorik of the Ethereal Commonwealth floated in his environmental suit, his gaseous form shimmering with colors that indicated profound philosophical disturbance. The ancient ethereals had developed mathematical models that predicted the rise and fall of civilizations based on observable patterns. But humanity was demonstrating capabilities that existed nowhere in their extensive databases. Their 3,000-year-old understanding of galactic military science was crumbling in real time. Ambassador Torres finally stood to address the council, his movement causing conversations to halt across the vast chamber. When he spoke, his voice carried the same quiet authority that humans had always used in diplomatic settings. But now that authority seemed backed by power that the galaxy was only beginning to understand. The accusations came like waves crashing against a seawall. The Draxi demanded explanations for weapons that violated energy output treaties. The Hive Collective buzzed about deception and hidden military buildup. The ethereals spoke of betrayal and the corruption of peaceful space exploration. Species after species rose to condemn humanity for hiding their true nature while participating in galactic civilization as if they were harmless explorers. Ambassador Torres listened to each accusation with the same patient attention he had given to 3 centuries of diplomatic discourse. When the chamber finally fell silent, waiting for his response, he delivered words that would be remembered long after the current crisis had passed into history. He reminded the council that humanity had never claimed to be pacifist, only that they preferred peace to war. The distinction was lost on most delegates, but the few military analysts present began to understand the true horror of what they were witnessing. Intelligence reports continued to flood the council chambers as the scope of human military capability became clear. Every human colony was revealing itself to be a fortress world with manufacturing capacity that dwarfed entire sectors of galactic industry. Every merchant vessel was shedding false hulls to expose weapon systems that made the most advanced warships look primitive. Every research station was demonstrating defensive capabilities that could withstand assault fleets that had conquered dozens of worlds. In Corvan space, the war had evolved beyond anything in galactic military history. Human forces moved through enemy territory like a force of nature, unstoppable and inevitable in their advance. They fought with mathematical precision that eliminated waste and maximized effectiveness, treating warfare as a science to be perfected rather than an art to be celebrated. General Patricia Wang commanded the Northern Front from a mobile command center that appeared to be nothing more than a standard exploration vessel. Her forces had penetrated deep into Corvan territory, bypassing heavily defended systems to strike at the industrial heart of the Empire. The Corvans had built their military doctrine around territorial control and defensive positions, but humans were demonstrating that modern warfare was about information, mobility, and the ability to strike anywhere at any time. The psychological impact on Corvan forces was as devastating as the physical destruction. Warriors who had built their identity around military superiority found themselves facing an enemy that seemed to know their thoughts before they thought them. that anticipated every strategy and had prepared perfect counters for every tactic. The confidence that had made Corvan military doctrine effective was crumbling as reports arrived of defeats that should have been impossible. Emperor Khazar's palace had become a fortress under siege, even though no human forces had approached the Corvan homeworld. His advisors reported the systematic collapse of military infrastructure across the empire as human strike teams eliminated key installations with surgical precision. Supply lines that had operated flawlessly for centuries were disrupted by forces that seemed to materialize from empty space. Communications networks were compromised by sabotage programs that had apparently been in place for decades. The Emperor himself could no longer deny the magnitude of his mistake. The species he had dismissed as evolutionary weaklings were demonstrating military capabilities that made his empire look primitive and outdated. Every battle revealed new human technologies that shouldn't exist, tactics that violated accepted military theory and coordination that surpassed anything in galactic history. Captain Lisa Rodriguez piloted her stealth infiltration craft through the heart of Corvan space, her mission to gather intelligence on the Empire's remaining defensive capabilities. Her ship represented technology that the galaxy had never suspected humans possessed, able to move undetected through sensor networks that had protected Corvan territory for generations. The information she collected would be used to plan the final phase of humanity's campaign, the elimination of Corvan military power with minimal loss of life on both sides. Back in the council chambers, the debate had devolved into barely controlled panic as delegates struggled to understand the implications of humanity's revealed capabilities. If humans could destroy the Corvan Empire so easily, what did that mean for the rest of galactic civilization? How many other human capabilities remained hidden behind their facade of peaceful exploration and scientific research? Ambassador Torres concluded his remarks with a simple statement that sent chills through every delegate present. He explained that humanity had spent 3 centuries preparing for war while hoping it would never come. They had studied every species, analyzed every military doctrine, and developed counters for every possible threat. The galaxy had forced them to demonstrate these preparations, and now everyone would live with the consequences of that decision. The god of war had awakened from its long sleep, and the galaxy would never be the same. And the balance of power that had maintained relative stability for centuries was shifting in ways that no one could predict or control. Humanity had revealed itself to be not just another galactic civilization, but something entirely different, something that would reshape the very nature of interstellar politics and military doctrine. As the session adjourned and delegates returned to their ships to report to their governments, the true scope of the crisis was becoming clear. The Corvan Empire was collapsing, but the greater question was what humanity intended to do with the power they had revealed. The galaxy held its breath and waited to learn whether their newest gods would be merciful or vengeful. Emperor Khazar knelt in the ruins of his throne room as human soldiers stood silently around him like harbingers of a new age. 96 days had passed since the attack on New Terra, and in that brief span of time, the mighty Corvan Empire had ceased to exist. The galaxy watched in stunned silence as the Emperor's unconditional surrender was broadcast from his own palace, his words carrying across space to civilizations that had trembled at the mention of Corvan military power. The end had come with shocking swiftness once human forces reached the Empire's core worlds. Corvan defenders who had terrorized the galaxy for centuries found themselves facing an enemy that seemed to exist in a different category of warfare entirely. Human battle groups moved through space with perfect coordination, their weapons striking with precision that eliminated military targets while leaving civilian infrastructure untouched. It was conquest elevated to the level of surgical art, conducted by minds that understood both the science of war and the philosophy of peace. Director Lisa Parks stood in the Situation Room, deep beneath Earth's surface, watching as the final phase of humanity's campaign concluded exactly according to the plans developed decades earlier. The holographic displays showed human forces in position throughout former Corvan territory, their presence marking the end of an empire that had dominated this region of space for 2 centuries. But the displays also showed something unprecedented. In galactic military history, the systematic reconstruction of a defeated enemy rather than its exploitation. The galaxy's shock deepened as humanity revealed the terms of Corvan surrender. Instead of annexation, occupation, or the traditional plundering that followed military conquest, humans offered something that no species had ever seen before: complete reconstruction under human supervision. Corvan worlds would be rebuilt according to human engineering standards, their populations fed and housed, their civilization restored with human values of restraint and controlled aggression guiding every decision. General Mark Davis commanded the reconstruction effort from a converted Corvan military station that had been transformed into a humanitarian coordination center. His engineers worked alongside former enemy soldiers to repair the damage caused by centuries of militaristic resource allocation. Weapons factories were converted to produce medical supplies and construction equipment, while military academies were restructured to teach conflict resolution and defensive strategy rather than aggressive conquest. The transformation was as comprehensive as it was rapid. Corvan citizens who had known only conquest and domination learned new concepts that had no equivalent in their warrior culture. Human administrators introduced ideas of mercy toward defeated enemies, reconstruction instead of exploitation, and the use of superior force to build rather than destroy. The psychological impact was profound. Reshaping Corvan society at its fundamental level, Admiral Sarah Brooks supervised the integration of former Corvan military units into human-led peacekeeping forces. Warriors who had built their identity around aggressive expansion were retrained to protect rather than conquer, to defend rather than attack. The process required patience and understanding that amazed the galaxy, demonstrating humanity's commitment to transforming their enemies rather than simply defeating them. The Galactic Council convened once again, but the atmosphere had changed completely from previous sessions. Ambassador Michael Torres still sat in the same modest section reserved for human representatives. But now when he spoke, the entire galaxy listened with attention that bordered on reverence. Humanity's voice in galactic affairs carried new weight that had been earned through the demonstration of overwhelming power tempered by unprecedented restraint. Chancellor Vex of the Draxi Republic found himself studying human military doctrine with the desperate intensity of a drowning man reaching for salvation. His warrior culture had built its reputation on tactical sophistication and individual combat prowess, but humans had demonstrated coordination and strategic thinking that made Draxi military science look primitive. Delegations of Draxi officers traveled to human space to learn from the species they had once dismissed as evolutionary weaklings. The Hive Collective's representatives buzzed with harmonic frequencies that conveyed profound respect mixed with bewilderment. Their species had achieved perfect coordination through millions of years of collective consciousness, yet humans were demonstrating organizational capabilities that surpassed even their most sophisticated hive strategies. Individual humans operating independently had somehow achieved tactical synchronization that the collective's greatest minds couldn't understand or replicate. Prime Minister Jorak of the Ethereal Commonwealth floated in his environmental suit while his gaseous form shimmered with colors indicating philosophical revolution. The mathematical models that have predicted galactic political development for 3,000 years were being rewritten to account for humanity's unique approach to interstellar relations. The ancient ethereals found themselves learning from a species they had classified as a temporary curiosity less than a century earlier. Dr. Elena Rodriguez worked in the former Corvan capital, overseeing medical programs that treated both the physical and psychological wounds left by centuries of militaristic culture. Her teams included human specialists and former Corvan military physicians working together to heal populations that had never known peace. The sight of former enemies collaborating to rebuild rather than destroy sent shockwaves through galactic civilization that were still reverberating months later. The reconstruction of Corvan space proceeded with efficiency that amazed outside observers. Human engineering cores transformed devastated worlds, into models of sustainable development, while economists restructured imperial finances to support reconstruction rather than military expansion. Educational systems were reformed to teach critical thinking and peaceful conflict resolution alongside traditional Corvan cultural values that emphasized honor and courage. Ambassador Torres addressed the Galactic Council from his familiar position, but his words carried authority that commanded attention from every delegate present. He explained that humanity had demonstrated the true meaning of strength, the power to choose restraint even when overwhelming force was available. The galaxy had forced humans to reveal their military capabilities, but now they were choosing to use that power to build rather than dominate. The implications rippled through galactic civilization like waves from a stone dropped in still water. If humans could transform the Corvan Empire so completely, what did that mean for other aggressive species that had built their identities around military conquest? How would the balance of power shift when the galaxy's most peaceful species had revealed itself to be its most capable military force? Commander Robert Hayes monitored long-range sensors from his converted asteroid mining station, watching as human reconstruction efforts expanded beyond former Corvan territory. Other species were requesting human assistance with infrastructure projects, defensive planning, and conflict resolution. The galaxy was voluntarily placing itself under human influence not because it feared human military power, but because it respected human wisdom in using that power responsibly. The transformation was not limited to former enemy territory. Throughout human space, the careful deceptions of 3 centuries were being gradually revealed and replaced with transparent governance that other species could observe and learn from. Colonies that had masqueraded as simple farming communities opened their underground facilities to galactic inspection, demonstrating how defensive capabilities could coexist with peaceful development. Director Park reviewed the final reports from across human space, documenting the successful completion of humanity's greatest gamble. They had revealed their true capabilities to a galaxy that had dismissed them as irrelevant, fought a war that could have destroyed galactic civilization, and emerged as the dominant military power in known space. But more importantly, they had demonstrated that true strength lay not in the ability to destroy, but in the wisdom to know when destruction was necessary and the restraint to use force only in service of building something better. The god of war had awakened, demonstrated its terrible power, and chosen to return to sleep, but not before reshaping the galaxy according to principles of controlled aggression and defensive strength. Humanity's colonies remained as peaceful as ever, their inhabitants going about their daily lives with the same calm efficiency they had always shown. But now the galaxy understood that this peace was not the peace of the weak, but the peace of those strong enough to choose mercy over vengeance, reconstruction over exploitation, and wisdom over raw power. The greatest warriors in galactic history had proven themselves not through conquest but through restraint, not through domination but through liberation, not through fear but through the respect earned by those who fight only when they must and who build rather than destroy when the fighting ends. The galaxy was safer for their vigilance and wiser for having learned the true meaning of strength tempered by mercy.